Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3, 4. Test, test. Natalie, see and move. It's moving there. Okay.
See?
One last time.
All right, the time is, I don't know if I can see that, 9:02. I call to order the May 13th, 2019 CSLB Public Affairs meeting. I'm Joan Hancock, the committee chair. Since this is our first of 4 committee meetings today, we're going to say the Pledge of Allegiance now. Frank Shetter, can you please lead us?
Let Johnny go, please.
Let who do it?
Johnny here? No.
I'll do it.
Okay.
All right, please stand. All right, Rick, can you please call roll and establish a quorum?
Yes, Joan Hancock.
Here.
Frank Altamora has an excused absence. David De La Torre.
Here.
Michael Layton.
Here.
Frank Shetter. Nancy Springer. We do have a quorum.
Next, I'd like to ask committee members to introduce themselves and staff, starting with Missy.
Missy Vickery, Chief of Enforcement.
Mike Jemnetsky, Legislation.
Justin Paddock, Licensing Chief.
Rick Lopes, Chief of Public Affairs.
David De La Torre, board member.
Mike Layton, board member.
David Foe, registrar.
Joan Hancock, board member.
Nancy Springer, Board Member.
Tanya Corcoran, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Christy Shields, Counsel for the Board.
Felice Jones, Executive Staff.
Jane Kreidler, Public Affairs.
In the audience, starting with Johnny. Anybody else? It's voluntary. You don't have to introduce yourself, but if you'd like to, we welcome you to do so.
Rick Edwards, Work Preservation. Kevin Albanese, board member.
Amber Foreman, Public Affairs. Deborah Moss, PHCC, California.
Richard Marks, Pacific Advocacy Group.
Becky Lake, Enforcement. Stacy Hall, Legends. Debbie Stefan, Executive.
Phil Vermeulen, contractor licensing center.
Karen Nelson, Department of Consumer Affairs.
Ted Rieger from North Comfort News.
Charlotte Allison, Licensing. Elizabeth Robinson, Licensing. Colonel Team, Public Affairs. Christina Duff, Enforcement.
Raju Shah, IT Manager.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to start this morning by noting all the individuals on the board and some staff that are leaving or moving on to other things. And first of all, that would be Frank Shetter to my left. Frank, you've been on our committee, and we want to thank you for your service here. And I'd like to note how much I appreciate your passion on this board, on this committee, and always for the things that are important to you and your constituency. Frank has been on the board since 2011, so 6 years of commitment, serving as one of our 2 specialty contractor members. So thank you again for all your contribution to our board and to this committee. I've had the pleasure of serving on this board since 2007, and that includes 4 years on the executive committee, and one of those years as board chair. I've also chaired Public Affairs Committee 2 separate times, the Legislative Committee 2 separate times, and licensing as well. Thank you for allowing me to serve. Agenda item B. This is time for public comment for items not on the agenda and future agenda item request. To allow our committee meeting today time to conduct its business, I'll be limiting public comments to 5 minutes apiece. Please note that the state law prohibits committee members from discussing any matter brought up during public comment. We're also not allowed to act on any item not on today's agenda. If you want the committee to discuss a topic not on the agenda, you can ask us to consider placing that issue on the agenda of a future committee meeting. If you have an application, complaint, disciplinary charge pending before the board, we ask that you do not discuss details of your case or pending complaint. Committee members are not permitted to receive evidence or information that is not a part of the administrative record in the case. Please be aware that this will not be the public's only opportunity to make comments during this committee meeting. If your comments are related to a specific agenda item, you can make your comments now, but you may want to wait until that item comes up for discussion. We'll be sure to ask for public comment during each agenda item. At this time, are there any members of the public who wish to address the committee or to offer an agenda item for a future meeting? All right, thank you. Do any committee members have any item they'd like to place on a future meeting agenda? Seeing, hearing none, we'll move to agenda item, that would be C. This is the draft disaster response plan and presentation of a video on CSLB disaster response on page 7. And this is the first of 3 updates we will be getting on action items on our 2019-2021 strategic plan. This item appears in 2 places in our plan as Enforcement Objective 2.1 and Public Affairs Objective 4.2. The item has a target date of June 2019. Since Public Affairs is the lead on this item, this is where the update is taking place. Public Affairs Chief Rick Lopes has our update and a new video that highlights our disaster response. Go ahead, Rick.
Thanks, Joan. Okay, we are on page 9 of the board packet, and anybody who's followed the board for any amount of time knows that we're very aggressive and very active when it comes to post-disaster response. We're one of the lead state agencies. We're involved from very early on and then through long-term problems with a disaster. We gave you just kind of a brief background. Now, the board has had a post-disaster plan in place for more than 30 years. It's evolved. A lot of changes were made after 1994's Northridge earthquake. We've expanded, and there were lots of problems with a lot of complaints after that earthquake. The board has become much more aggressive over the years in moving forward and doing things early on, educating the survivors of the different disasters, also educating people who may be thinking about going in as an unlicensed contractor into a disaster area. And with the increase that we've seen in disasters over the last couple of years, we thought this would be a really good time for us to actually get down on paper and formalize the plans and the actions that we're already doing, but to put it in a more formal setting in case we all happen to get hit by a bus tomorrow or something. At least the people who will follow us will know what we were doing. So as you can see on page 10, some of the elements of our plan that we're going to be doing. This is after we're meeting with enforcement. Enforcement and public affairs, carry a lot of the water when it comes to this. Public affairs, because we do have the outreach elements, the media. We do, between our different senior scam stoppers and rebuilding workshops, we play a big part in that. And enforcement does as well, because they're responsible for obviously enforcing the laws, looking for the unlicensed contractors. But they also do help us out because of their staffing as far as education, whether it be posting signs in disaster areas, helping out at local assistance centers, or sometimes we'll get requests for presentations, and they're just because of the geographic proximity to the disasters, it may be more opportune for them to do that. And we certainly also have a lot of help from licensing, administration, other groups within the board. When we have multiple assistance centers, as we've seen over the last couple of years, we tap all different parts of the board. So what you see on page 10 there, these are the elements that we're going to be including in the plan. I'm not going to go into any great depth. We will be presenting the plan to the board. Once it's done, you guys will be able to see that plan. But you can see we're talking about our disaster, the team assignments, the responsibilities, the coordination. One of our challenges is because there's so many different disasters we're responding to is trying to have somebody who can oversee the different elements, whether it be enforcement and outreach. And so we do have a coordinator from enforcement who oversees our entire disaster response. We're also talking about staff training, cross-training. As I mentioned, because of when there's multiple assistance centers open, we have to staff those on a daily basis. And sometimes if there's multiple centers that are open, we're going to have multiple staff, and that will draw away, keeping them from their other work. So we're looking for opportunities to be able to cross-train staff to help pick up the slack of what those people are not able to do while they're in the assistance centers. And then you can see the different elements between the staffing for those centers, posting of disaster signs, the media outreach, social media. We also do outreach to building departments, through the legislature, to industry groups. So you can see everything listed there. We'll go into some depth as far as a plan for, again, if we do get hit by a bus, that people will be able to follow. And we be happy to have any input from the committee members if there's something that jumps out then that we've left out. We think we've done a good job of that. We'll have continual meetings with enforcement and other staff here as we finish developing this. We're shooting at our deadline, which is next month. So we are on our way towards that, and right now we expect to be able to meet that deadline. Before I show the video, I would just like to ask, is there any input from any committee members?
Yeah, I have a question. Rick, in terms of partnership development, what are you talking about there?
Well, we, especially on the enforcement side and also on the public affairs side, is we do look to our partners because other state agencies and even local agencies do play a key part in this. One of the closest state agencies we work with after a disaster is the Department of Insurance. It works out well for both agencies. They have more peace officers than we have, and so they're actually in some ways able to help us get access into disaster areas very early on. We also work closely with their public affairs teams. They've got some very similar messages they're getting out about public adjusters and the like, and so we team up on the outreach. We've conducted a number of press conferences over the years that have included the insurance commissioner. We kind of cross-train with them as well. If they're doing something that we're not involved in, they always talk about unlicensed contractors. When we do our work, if they're not with us, we talk about the insurance question. So that works really well. We also, on the enforcement end, is they do go in quickly and they team with the local district attorneys and law enforcement. One of our biggest benefits is if we can get as many eyes on the disaster scene as possible, because we can't be there every day. So we've also done some training. Enforcement has done training for the local police and district attorneys, things they can look for, signs that people may be unlicensed. So we have more eyes and ears that are out there. So it's developing those relationships once a disaster happens, especially on the local level. It could be in a specific, Butte County and in Sonoma County, Napa County. We'll go in and make sure that we've built those relationships up with the local people, and as well as other state agencies.
Well, this is really well done in terms of your layout of this list, and I think it's really important for us to know that, because sometimes public affairs doesn't get to tout all the work that they really do, and having you explain some of these things really helps me understand, and I'm sure the other committee members.
Thank you. Yes, and I will note that one of the items on there that we've actually just started up in the last couple of years are the rebuilding workshops. We've always, had our senior scam stoppers, but we didn't make a real concerted effort to actually, if other people were holding workshops, we would participate with them, but we're actually, for the first time, conducting our own rebuilding workshops. And I think those have been very successful, not only doing them specifically for the survivors, but we're also doing them for the contractors. And I think that's been helpful in helping prepare them so we don't have problems down the road, whether that be talking about the contract requirements, maybe they're thinking about adding a classification, maybe having workers for the first time, so we'll talk about workers' comp insurance. We've partnered with the State Compensation Insurance Fund, so they participated in a number of those. And there's not necessarily a way to measure it, but we feel pretty confident that we're preventing problems down the road by doing these, so we're happy with how those have worked out.
In terms of consumer community response, where are you getting the most feedback in terms of any progress or success that you're making, just, with individuals actually affected by these disasters and the work that you and your team does?
The workshops have been really helpful because it gives us the opportunity to meet one-on-one with them. One of the things that and I'm sure Nancy can speak to it, she's been involved in so many of the disasters, the local governments have gotten, unfortunately, so good at responding. There's lots of plans in place, whether they be plan checks, all the permits, the requirements that the survivors have to go through to get that. They know the messages, they know the importance of the contract. There's lots more opportunities to get that information into their hands. So it's nice with these workshops we're actually able to do it one-on-one, but between the assistance centers, having materials available with the building departments, and other ways, I think they're understanding, and one of the messages we really drive home with them is to understand that they're not alone in this, that there's a lot of resources that they can take advantage of.
Nancy?
So I'll add to that. Rick is correct. When I was working in Butte County as building official up there during the disasters, came up and did some of the workshops, and they found it very helpful, the contractors. I think it kind of put it on alert in the neighborhood as well, that these workshops were going on, and that CSLB was in the area. But you could not only, it wasn't just for the bad, but for the good, for the licensed contractors that needed that additional help. So it played both parts, which was very helpful. And then I think as far as consumers knowing, we would constantly hear, we saw CSLB signs out there, so we know they're around, you know. So we would hear that when they'd come in to get permits a lot, so that piece, that element as well was really helpful, so.
Anyone else on the committee want to ask Rick any questions or comments? And this is not the time to ask for public comment. We'll do that in a minute.
Fine, yes, I'll go ahead and, we've got about a 4-minute video to show just
All right,
kind of an overview of our response.
You know, I'm really pleased to be here because it's the culmination of a great effort that we put together with the Contractors Licensing Board. I remember saying months ago when there was still debris in this area that I'm standing in now, if you come here, if you violate the law, I'm going to prosecute you. And I've been true to that word. Not only have we gone after price gougers, but now we're going after unlicensed contractors. And listen, you may ask yourself, what's the big deal? Well, unlicensed contractors bring a lot of workers with them. These workers are not protected. So it's not only the consumer that's at risk, it's the workers that they engage as well. So from a public safety standpoint, this is a serious violation in our community. We are all working together to rebuild Sonoma County. Let's do it in a safe way so that we can continue to thrive.
So unless you want to come to Butte and leave on the sheriff's bus, don't. So what we want to make very clear is that our citizens have been subjected to way too much, and we will take a very, very hard stance on anyone that tries to take advantage of those citizens.
I have a long history of working with our District Attorney, Michael Ramsey, and have had a history of dealing with the Department of Insurance as well as State Contractors License Board, and I echo all of their sentiments. If you think you're going to come into this community and further victimize my citizens, I will tell you that I will put everything towards preventing that from happening, and I'm glad that I've got great partners here who will pick up the fight and help us hold those people accountable.
Thank you, Rick. That was great. Congratulations. That deserves a hand.
Thank you. And as you can see in there, it is a team effort. There were a lot of different people involved, and we couldn't do it without their support. And so we believe that it is making a difference, that it is helping. And the other great thing about it is we do have a lot of attention paid towards it, and we actually, over the last week or so, there's been some media reports and some issues with one of our licensees in the Santa Rosa area, and we've just received a series of complaints. So I know that the Enforcement Division is being very aggressive in looking into those to make sure that those people are protected.
I think it is also the work that you do in public affairs and your team, and we as committee members and board members, is essentially the work that we committed to do when we took this oath on educating and teaching and protecting the consumer and by enforcing the law and licensing contractors that should be licensed. So I've always said, and you know my heart is in public affairs, that we get the state gets the biggest bang for the buck from this very tiny little committee of folks that support your staff and you in the Public Affairs Department, so thank you. So we're going to move, before we move, I'm going to ask if there's any committee members that want to comment on this item. Anybody else? Okay, this is time if there's any public comment on this item. All right, we'll move to agenda item D. This is the review and discussion of media efforts to publicize enforcement activities and relaunch CSLB's most wanted list on CSLB's website. This begins on page 11. With a review and discussion of media efforts to publicize enforcement activities and to relaunch CSLB's most wanted list. Again, a joint strategic plan item, enforcement item 2.3, public affairs item 4.4. Back to you, Rick.
Thanks, Joan. Yeah, this dovetails very well off of the disaster because obviously, as we've talked about, publicizing things are a great deterrent to not only help protect consumers, but also to let the people know, especially the unlicensed, that there are people out there looking for them. So one of the key things over the years that we do is we try to publicize enforcement activities. For a number of years, we issue press releases after every sting operation and look for other opportunities when cases come that we can highlight and feature. And so we will continue to do that, but we've met with enforcement and we've talked about looking for some other opportunities, which I'll discuss actually a little bit more in the next section, but we are going to continue. And as you see, one of the key things that we've done over the years is our most wanted. And actually, in preparing for the meeting, we talked about the fact that we actually launched our Most Wanted feature on January 30th, 2008. And I'll just note for our chair, that was Joan's first board meeting that we launched the Most Wanted website on, that it was reported upon. And there's the main criteria in people that make our Most Wanted is they need to have an active arrest warrant. We've had, I think, over the years, one licensed contractor who's been on the list, but the rest have been unlicensed contractors. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't other people out there that have arrest warrants, but fortunately, when arrest warrants come down, usually those people are able to be put in custody fairly quickly. So by the time we would put them on the Most Wanted list, they'd already be in custody. So that really doesn't make a lot of sense. So we focus on the people that either have gone underground, potentially have gone to other states, maybe in some cases other countries, but we are noting that they actually have arrest warrants, so if they are back in California, that it's another way for people, the consumers, to be able to look that kind of information up. And over the years, we have had situations where people have looked up because they were a little suspicious. They looked up the person's name and they popped up on a Google search on our website. And I know specifically there was a gentleman that was operating down in the San Diego area, and somebody in the Santa Cruz area, I believe, an elderly person had hired this person. The neighbor got a little suspicious, looked up the guy, and saw our Most Wanted out of San Diego and contacted us. So we then were able to find out that this person had moved his operations from San Diego to Santa Cruz. And so eventually he was arrested and convicted in both counties, and I believe he's still in state prison. So we feel that anything we can do to get the information out there. So this does take a partnership between public affairs and enforcement. And one of the challenges is it's not always top of mind with staff when they have an arrest warrant that these people, we're trying to, they may have either, as I mentioned, left the state or left the country. It's not necessarily a top of mind thing. So the first few years of our Most Wanted, we had a lot of activity, a lot of people who did get arrested. As you see at the bottom of page 13, in our first 6 years of existence, we had 18 suspects arrested. And since 2015, I'll be quite honest, it hasn't been a super high priority because these people, we don't get many new ones. So we still keep the site up and running, but we haven't done a lot of publicity for it. And partially, we think as a result, we've only had one of our Most Wanted suspects arrested since then. So we do want to make a commitment to relaunching the Most Wanted websites. Since we started working on this with enforcement, we do have a new Most Wanted person who's been added to the list, and so we're going to continue to work with them. Once we get this freshened up, make sure we've got all the new people that we can identify, we'll look to do some media outreach, maybe do a press conference or do some kind of something with the media to bring attention to that. As far as other elements besides the Most Wanted, you can see on page 14, we're listing some of the other things. We're obviously going to continue to issue our press releases. We'll be looking for press conferences, other ways to get the word out, consumer alerts. And one of the things that I'll mention a little bit more as we get into the next item, we're going to be doing a lot more on we're going to be developing a contractor website. In addition to what we have on our own current website, that we'll be able to use that for outreach as well. As far as the plan, we are developing the plan, again, with a June 2019 deadline for next month, and then implementation is set for next January. So we're working towards that. Again, in some ways, we'll be able to beat it, I think, with the Most Wanted, since we've already got a new person added. Hopefully by this fall, we'll be in place to be able to do some kind of press conference or additional media outreach.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any comments, any feedback? Public comment on this item? Hearing none, move to agenda item E, page 15. This is a review and discussion of outreach efforts to the industry and to licensees. From Rick.
Thank you. As noted on page 17, as far as a little bit of background, and Joan had mentioned earlier that education is part of the board's mission statement, to try to educate consumers to make sure they can make an informed decision when they're looking to hire contractors. We also have it in the Business and Professions Code that talks about disseminating information to our licensees. For years, we do publish an annual license law and reference book. It is for sale to the public, but it is online and available in a PDF form for free. That is the main law book and covers all the new laws especially. We also do post the information on our website. Starting back in 1937 was the first year that we actually published newsletters, our California licensed contractor. And as our population grew to now almost 300,000, the cost of printing and mailing has grown. So since 2015, the board approved us being able to do just an online edition of the newsletter, so we've continued to do that. And as the technology is advanced, we are now looking to create a separate website to be able to provide this information on more of an ongoing basis to our licensees instead of them having to wait for a quarterly newsletter to come out. It's going to be somewhat similar to what you would call a blog format. Our intranet for our employees follow this, but basically it's whenever we get news, we'll put it together and we'll put it out there, so it'll constantly be refreshing. And we'll be looking for opportunities too, as you can see on page 18, in this new website that we're currently in the process of building with our IT team. We'll be looking obviously at the news, changes to laws. We're looking at having sub-pages for specific classifications. So for example, if you're a landscape contractor, we'll have a page with news related specifically to landscape contractors, to the C27s, or maybe C8s if it's concrete. So we'll look at having some sub-pages, maybe some interactive engagement things where we'll be able to have questions and answers. We're also going to be looking to expand with, as you can see in the timeline area, we are currently in the process of, actually this week, we should be posting a new TV specialist. For the first time, we've been allowed to increase our staffing by one to add a video person. In the past, we've kind of all done that as part of our other jobs, but this will be the first time we've actually had a person that's devoted to videos. So we're going to be able to expand our videos and also get into the world of actually creating more videos as far as live video webcasts, instructional settings where we can maybe expand our current application workshops that we do here and in Norwalk. We'll expand them and start presenting them online, making them interactive. People will be able to ask questions, so we'll be able to reach applicants not just in person. And we're also looking at doing webcasts on interesting topics for our licensees as well, and actually beginning to produce audio podcasts. Our goal is to get information out there in as many different ways as possible that they'll be able to access this and listen or watch things at their convenience. So a lot of ideas that we've got kicking around, and once we get that position filled, and also you can see the hole in the wall behind us here, we are in the middle of a construction zone. We do have a new studio that we've gotten great support from the administrative staff and obviously the board here, and so they're allowing us to put everything in place that will enable us to be efficient in the production of these videos and podcasts. So we're thankful for that and looking forward to the construction job getting done so we can get going.
A question. With regard to the blog or the website, do we have the ability to do sort of an ongoing, hey, here's what happened at the last board meeting, not with concluding, I'm sure, since it takes another board meeting to confirm the minutes or support, but just to say that this is ongoing and these are the issues that are coming up or that came up at this board meeting so people are aware. And then the second part of my question, well, go ahead and answer that one.
Yeah, we certainly have the ability. We do videotape and we webcast ours, so we do have video. So it's certainly possible that we would have the time to be able to put highlights or maybe do something on it. If there's a specific agenda item, we could maybe do some kind of a summary of that item, include the video of the actual meeting.
Or see the video, attached
Exactly,
to
or we
this.
could do a shorter version or do something to produce it. We absolutely
could. I think there would be, personally, smaller contractors are, well, pretty much everybody in the field these days, but, they're going to work, they're coming home, they're going to work again at home. And, I would like to have the ability to have this kind of outreach to them. And I think if, there was something on the website that would jog the interest,
Yeah, we're definitely looking at that, and I think anybody, a lot of the people in business, video is the way that the internet is going. Everybody, you can watch it on your phones, you can get, YouTube and other things on your TVs now in a lot of cases. So we want to have that materials available so they can easily get to it on their schedule when they want to. So video definitely, I think, is going to be the way to go, and we'll look for every opportunity we can to put stuff out that they can watch and educate
and this
themselves.
could be a good area for other committee members to come up with ideas of things that they might think would be pertinent to their own industry, whether it's the construction industry at large or, other contracting events or educational events that they know about that you don't know about, to advertise or just to say, hey, here's a heads up. And
Yeah, and for the licensees as well, we do want to try to engage them and make it a two-way and give them the opportunities to let us know what would be helpful for them.
And in terms of the goings-on of the board itself, whether or not there are board member vacancies and where to apply for, if you want to be on a board or if you want to be among the incredible staff here. Speaking of which, I would like you to introduce your incredible staff that is here right now before we move to adjournment.
Okay, well, thank you. I think everybody's here. I think I ordered everybody to be here. The other supervisor on our staff is Claire Goldstein. She's there in the middle. She is responsible for a lot of our reports. The board package you see, she plays a big hand in that. Pretty much every written word that comes out is probably passed over her desk. We have Amber Foreman here. She's our graphic designer. So everything from the signs, you saw the disaster signs, the graphics. If you watch our webcast at all, the graphics you see in the webcasts. We've got we got Natalie Watmore and Kevin. And Kevin is fairly new here, and I always screw up his name. See, I always mess it up. But Kevin is fairly new to us. They're information officers. You can see right now they're handling the webcast, but they also help us with the media, the social media. Kevin is overseeing, and Natalie has done a great job in the labs before we got Kevin on board, handling our social media. And Jane Kreidler is here doing our minutes, and she's our outreach. So anytime you hear us talking about senior scam stoppers, a lot of the outreach, Jane is the one that coordinates that. So we're lucky she's actually in Sacramento today and not out on the road. So I think that covers everybody. We do have a student assistant who actually isn't here on Mondays, but we do have a student assistant as well. Thank you for letting me have that chance.
Okay, are there any committee members that might want to respond to this incredible report?
I just want to state that I think these are great elements that you're putting in there, because the websites are always changing, and it seems like they're always on their phones, especially in our permit center, and they're always looking at stuff. And the audio podcast seem to be the big thing lately, so it's good to see that we're sticking with the new trends and getting the information out there. So I think this is a great plan, as well as great staff. I want to thank them for all the hard work that they've been doing. So good job here.
I'd like to say, Rick, I've always appreciated you and your staff. You've always done a wonderful job and a great job for the CSLB. Thank you.
All right, and I will echo that. Thank you so much, Rick. You've been a joy to work with, and your staff is lucky to have you as you are them. So thank you so much. And I forgot to see if there was any member in the public, anyone. Claire, you're beaming back there. Anything you want to say about your boss over there? All right, thank you. We will move on to agenda item F, and that is the adjournment. Our business for today is concluded. Can I please get a motion and a second to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Thank you. Is there any committee comment at this time? Anyone from the public? One final chance to weigh in here. All right. Rick, please call the roll.
Joan Hancock.
Aye.
David De La Torre.
Aye.
Michael Layton.
Aye.
Frank Shetter.
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Aye.
Motion passes.
We're adjourned. Licensing committee is next.
Public comment session for items not on the agenda and future agenda item requests. Next is item Agenda B, our public comment section. The committee values the input of the public as part of its consumer protection mission and welcomes public comment for items not on today's agenda. There are other rules that apply. First, California law prohibits committee members from discussing any matter brought up during public comment. Also, we are not allowed to act on any item not on the agenda. If you want the committee to discuss a topic not on the agenda, you can ask us to consider placing that issue on the agenda for a future meeting. If you have an application, complaint, or disciplinary charges pending before the board, we ask that you do not discuss the details of your case or pending complaint. That's because board members may be the judges and by law are not permitted to receive evidence or information that is not part of the administrative record in the case. This will not be the public's only opportunity to make comments during today's meeting. If your comments don't involve an item on the agenda, this is your opportunity to make them. If your comments are related to a specific agenda, you may want to wait until that item comes up for discussion, or you can make your comments now if you prefer. At this time, are there any members of the public who wish to address the committee or offer an agenda item for a future meeting? Anyone? Okay, hearing none. Do any members of the committee have an item they would like to place on the agenda of a future meeting? Anyone? Hearing none. Moving on to item C. Review and discussion of possible legislative proposal to seek continuous appropriation for construction management education account. This item begins on page 29 and involves the construction management education account, or CMEA. The CMEA allows the board to issue grants to post-secondary institutions that offer construction management education programs. The money for the grants is made possible by donations from contractors, donations contractors can make while applying for renewing their license. The past year, the board authorized staff to distribute $150,000 in grants. However, staff is beginning to disperse grants. A budget issue arose. Justin, would you brief us, please?
Yes, thank you, Frank, and thank you, committee members. So for the last few years, the CMEA account has had a low balance, so we haven't been dispersing grants. But in 2018, at the board's direction, staff began preparing a grant disbursement, and we were actually planning to distribute $150,000 in grants. As we were finalizing that paperwork to do that distribution, we discovered that through a previous budget year process, our authority to spend $150,000 from this account was reduced to $100,000 a year. What we're looking for from the committee is a recommendation to essentially allow us to do a continuous appropriation moving forward on whatever number the board would like to disperse in that given year. This is coming to the licensing committee first, just because this is about skills development, so it's part of an applicant making sure they have their skills so they can eventually seek licensure. We have a proposed motion for the committee to consider, which I'll just read momentarily, but if the committee does make this motion, it would then next move to the legislative committee, because this would be a legislative proposal. We would actually have to update our statute. So just reading that motion, licensing committee approves seeking a continuous appropriation from the legislature for CSLB to distribute CMEA grants annually while maintaining a $50,000 reserve, and requests that the legislative committee consider this proposal for possible approval by the full board. Again, the staff reasoning was if we can just make sure we maintain a healthy reserve in any given year, there wouldn't be any surprises for disbursement. So that's why we set the $50,000 reserve as a recommendation. That's it, Frank.
Okay. Does anyone on the board wish to make that motion?
Sure, I'll make it.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Elizabeth, would you call roll?
I'm so
Excuse me,
sorry.
We need public comment too, I think, don't we? Go ahead.
I just want to make sure we seek board comment and public comment.
Yeah, okay. Do the board members have any comments?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, so you said the amount was reduced. The allocation was reduced by who?
It's unclear. As part of the budget process, there's a lot of fingers in the pot. The best way I could explain it is, as the budget bill was moving through the legislative process, one of the subcommittees possibly, or the conference committee, or in the actual final approval, it was changed. I don't know exactly where in the process it was changed.
Now, the reason I asked that, is that money coming from originally contractors when they're asked during renewal if they want to make?
Yes. So it's essentially a charitable contribution that contractors can make, and it goes into a side account. The change in the budget process doesn't alter that balance by any means. It just alters how much we can spend in any given year of that fund. I think Christy has a...
Also, when you put the words continuous appropriation in legislation, it prevents them from borrowing from that account in tight budget years. So sometimes it's tough to get the continuous appropriation language in because they know what that means. That means it's got to be dedicated for this purpose only and cannot be used for any other purpose, which is, I think, in line with the purpose that you have for this account. But just know that that's a challenge and probably why we've had difficulty getting it enacted in the past. So.
And thankfully, in the past, we have gotten this continuous appropriation. My speculation, but this is speculation, is it's because it's such a low amount. There's not a lot to loan from. I think we can pull it off now for that same reason. Just so that you're aware, staff moving forward is actually going to be working with these schools to see if we can promote some of the larger contractors to making more sizable donations. But we'll get this language first.
How much is in the account right now?
$363,000.
Okay, so we're well funded in that account.
Yes, sir.
Is there any public comment? Anyone? Hearing none. Elizabeth, now would you call roll, please?
Frank Shetter. Frank Altamura, excused absence. David De La Torre.
Aye.
Joan Hancock.
Aye.
Michael Layton.
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay. We are at committee members. Would anyone like to entertain the following motion? License Committee, okay, we did that. Okay, okay. Roll. Sorry. Item D, discussion for possible action on whether to enter into a reciprocity agreement with North Carolina and Oregon for B general contractors license and legislative options for trade waiver exams. This item begins on page 33. In April 2018, the board directed staff to pursue reciprocity agreements, including one with North Carolina Licensing Board for general contractors. The staff has been in those discussions, and Justin will brief the committee on the status of the potential North Carolina agreement. Justin?
Thank you. So we've been in discussions for the past 6-7 months with our counterparts in North Carolina. The wrinkle that came up as we started our discussions was that North Carolina actually has 2 tests. If you'll recall, in April of 2018, the board wanted us to pursue reciprocity agreements with states who use the NASCLA exam. In North Carolina's case, they actually use the NASCLA exam, but they also allow their own state exam. So that complicated our negotiation, essentially. We tried to pursue a negotiation where we would just allow reciprocity from anyone who took the NASCLA exam, but North Carolina staff felt that that was unacceptable. We did start an evaluation of North Carolina's state exam, but we did want to brief the board on the status of that, which is it would be exceedingly difficult to, moving forward, continue to analyze the North Carolina exam as opposed to the NASCLA exam. Any state that's using the NASCLA exam, fortunately California is a part of that exam development every 5 to 8 years that NASCLA actually basically reconfigures their NASCLA exam. California is a part of that process. We understand what changes are being made. We are able to make comment on them, et cetera. That would be much more difficult if we were to expand this to other states. And so we wanted to bring this to committee for consideration. The staff recommendation is at this time is is not to pursue a reciprocity agreement with North Carolina just because they're accepting these 2 tests rather than the NASCLA-only test. In addition to that, just briefly, Oregon actually has no trade exam, so there's really no ability to enter into a reciprocity agreement with them at this time. We presented 2 options for the committee to consider. I'll read off one. The second option is essentially to take no action at this time, but here's the recommendation that staff was proposing for committee's consideration. Recommend that the board direct staff not to enter into an agreement with North Carolina and Oregon at this time, but explore the feasibility of a legislative proposal to make eligible for a CSLB B general building trade exam waiver to any individual in the United States who has passed the NASCLA exam and has 5 years of good standing as a licensed general contractor in another state. Staff would report its findings to the licensing committee. So we wouldn't enter into any sort of legislative proposal this time, but staff would essentially make some more research and make a proposal. This idea came out of something our counterparts are doing in Nevada, which is to consider reciprocity even when another state may not grant it for California licensees. We will just disregard that, and at least anyone who wants to come to California and start working, we will consider that. The staff would have to do a lot more research to entertain sort of the feasibility of that legislative proposal, but we did want to bring it to the committee for their consideration.
Thank you. Board members have any comments?
Yeah, I do. Okay. Do we have testing people here today?
We do not in the audience, but I'll do my best to answer your questions.
Well, how closely aligned is the NASCLA exam with the California exam? I mean, this is kind of you're asking us to respond to something, that we don't even have information about.
So we do have a detailed comparison, and if you'd like, I can make sure that we can provide that to the full board for consideration. The exam is considerably different than the California exam. The NASCLA exam is also somewhat different, but there's a lot of similarities. This one would be a little bit more different. And the major distinction between the NASCLA exam and what North Carolina does is essentially who develops it. In North Carolina, a private vendor creates their exam and creates their exam
But my question was how closely aligned is NASCLA to California? Or North Carolina and NASCLA to California?
I can't put a number on it, but I can provide a comparison table. If you'd like to take no action at that time, I can make sure that the full board has those materials.
I just have a question, because I thought we covered this when OPES came and gave their presentation, because we can't pursue reciprocity if their requirements aren't the same or greater than California's. So I thought there had already been a determination at a prior board meeting, and that's why the board directed you to pursue these agreements.
So what
Just for
OPES
clarification.
reviewed was the NASCLA exam. OPS has
Right.
not had the opportunity to review the North Carolina
Right,
exam, which is
right.
what we're talking about.
Exactly, so.
Just focus on the NASCLA exam,
So that's what,
Justin.
but she asked about the NASCLA, that's what I was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have misheard you. I apologize, Joan. So the NASCLA exam is fairly similar to California's exam, and the board actually took a briefing by testing staff in April of last year, as well as OPES staff, I believe in April, but I can't recall if OPS was in April. And based on that, they made a motion that staff should pursue reciprocity agreements with states that use the NASCLA-only exam. Our difficulty here is North Carolina uses 2.
North Carolina uses.
They use NASCLA, and they also have a state one that they use. And either one works for their applicants.
But I
So
think
I
just for
like the idea
clarification.
of this cross-comparative chart for us to review, although having just heard you say what you did, I don't know if that's, we're belaboring the point already made at the last board meeting, but I still feel like this, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that staff are trying to explain that it turns out, originally they thought it was just the NASCLA exam in North Carolina, but it turns out they have 2 exams, and they're not able to validate at this time that second exam, it provides the same criteria, at least as your standards in California. And that's one of the prongs you have to meet in order to give reciprocity.
Right.
So that's the issue before you, whether you want to continue exploring that or whether you would like to direct staff to not pursue agreements with North Carolina and Oregon because they're not able to substantiate that the qualifications that they use for their exams are the same or greater than California.
You know, if I could just comment on that. It's my understanding that in North Carolina, they're not willing to accept our applicants for reciprocity unless we'll accept the North Carolina
Right.
exam, of which the board did not approve us to pursue. So I think what Justin's saying is we're not asking you to approve reciprocity with North Carolina at this time, only to consider discussing this at a future meeting where we could accept just the NASCLA exam from states without having to accept their applicants who have taken their individual state exam.
Yeah, I was just clarifying that because the motion was to direct staff to not pursue reciprocity with those two states. So just to clarify that it's a two-part request from staff to consider, because the prior motion was to direct them to pursue these agreements. So to tell them now you agree not to continue pursuing those agreements?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Christy.
Well, I think at one of our meetings, we determined that the national exam was substantially the same, wasn't it?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, and with 5 years' experience and good standing, this would be not somebody who just took the exam, but somebody had years of experience in the trade, right?
That's correct.
So it's not quite just the exam itself, so. Okay. At this point, Nancy, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So just for clarification, on the reciprocity with Oregon and Louisiana, we accept the NASCLA, we take part in that exam, we participate with that, and then they accept that CSLB's B General Building Trade exam, they accept that.
So in Louisiana, you're absolutely right. We are now in a reciprocity agreement with Louisiana, and it's 5 years good standing for our licensees going there and vice versa. And Louisiana does just the NASCLA only exam. In the case of Oregon, this is a much more straightforward issue than the North Carolina, so I apologize for the confusion. Oregon actually doesn't have a trade exam, so there's nothing to have a reciprocal agreement with. There's really no there to pursue.
Okay. And then in the option one, are you proposing just to accept, because I think I just heard Dave say something different, so you're proposing that those that pass the NASCLA exam and then have 5 years of good standing, that we would accept that?
Correct. And again, at this point, it would just be research. This is something that we discovered our Nevada counterparts are doing. And we just want to gather more information because this may be something the board may wish to consider at a future meeting.
Okay, so then let me clarify that more for myself. So option one is saying, let's just move forward with a little bit more research. Option number two is saying do nothing.
Both options are saying do nothing with North Carolina or Oregon at this time. But the distinction between option 1 and 2 is with option 1, you're also having us do some research just to see if there's a way for us to develop a legislative proposal where there's a sort of a one-way reciprocity with just anyone who wants to come work in California if they've taken the NASCLA exam and wherever they work, they've worked their 5 years good standing.
Thank you.
And that would just be research at this time.
Okay.
Well, I just want to clarify, even if that went through, they'd still have to take the law and business examination. So it's not a just, pass through. You would still have the law and business examination to take for California.
Correct.
Right, trade waiver ruling. Okay, are there any other board comments? Okay, and are there any public comments on this item? Anyone? Hearing none. Committee members have a choice to take no action at this time, and after public comment, we'll move to the item to consider for motion. The motion would be recommended that the board direct staff not to enter into an agreement with North Carolina and Oregon at this time, but explore the feasibility of legislative proposal to make eligible for a CSLB B building trade exam waiver to any individual in the United States who has passed the NASCLA NASCLA exam and has 5 years of good standing as a licensed general contractor in another state. Staff will report his findings to the licensing committee. Would anyone like to make that motion? Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do the board members have any comments? Hearing none. Does the public have any comments? Liz, would you call roll?
Frank Shetter,
Aye.
Frank Alatura, excused absence, David De La Torre,
Aye.
Jen Hincock,
Aye.
Michael Layton,
Aye.
Nancy Springer. Motion passes.
It passes. Okay. Item E, update and discussion about development of a possible remodeling and home improvement license classification. Since December, staff has conducted research on the feasibility of a new remodeling licensing classification. They have held stakeholder meetings and met with several constituencies. Justin, will you provide us an update?
Thank you so much, Frank. So what we've done so far is we've held one stakeholder meeting. Staff is continuing to gather internal data for anyone who's going through the licensure process. If you get denied based on experience, we've created specialized codes to gather why exactly you have received that denial. We're continuing to collect that data, but we're still seeking some more external data on, especially on that population that may not even be applying for a license in the first place and may be qualified or may not be. To that end, we've actually had several productive meetings with day labor centers, especially in Southern California. We're going to be conducting an anonymous survey where their members can complete it, so we get a sense of what these individuals are doing on a day-to-day basis. Is this genuine remodeling work? What are the trades that they're actually involved in on a day-to-day basis? In addition to that, we're also meeting with several businesses and conducting a similar survey from those businesses, especially the remodeling businesses is where we're focusing, just to also get a sense of what the day-to-day process is. Again, we're really looking at is 90% of the work really away from structural framing as just various specialized trades, or is everyone out there really doing the structural framing aspect of the job, whether they're licensed or unlicensed? Again, we're continuing to gather data, and we hope to have those items essentially presented in fall or winter, just based on the response rate we get of this year.
Yeah, okay, so this survey with the industry that you're doing, what's that like? What does it look like? The survey, where does it go? Up and down the state? Is it local? Is it, who's it to?
So it's certainly going to be going to the Day Labor Centers network. We're finalizing with edits with those individuals right now. It's about a page. We're trying to create language that's just easily translatable, and we're also just trying to make it a very simplified form that someone can complete in less than 5 minutes. And in addition to that, we're also trying to give it
So,
out to any interested
in terms
business.
of those day labor services, these are individuals that are mostly doing just like construction labor generally, or are they doing other tasks that involve any of the other C classification trades? Or are they doing demo? Are they doing?
We don't know, so that's actually part of the
Okay.
question, is we're trying
And
to figure out.
who are they associated with? Are they in private entities, or are they associated with any other
The day labor-
governmental entities?
The Day Labor Centers, for the most part, are 501c3s, but I don't want to speak absolutely just because I haven't done detailed research about where they get their funding. But for the most part, these are entities that may be getting some sort of government assistance. For example, the Los Angeles Day Labor Center gets a grant from the city of Los Angeles. But for the most part, you're talking about charitable organizations. And then again, private enterprise, we're also trying to get this survey out to private enterprise to fill out.
Excuse me, Justin, when you say private enterprise, are you referring to like Home Depot or Lowe's? I mean, we see a
No,
lot of
I'm
material.
sorry. There's especially in Southern California, I've seen the largest population, but there's actually licensees that are specifically focusing on remodeling. So for example, their business model is about remodeling kitchen and baths. And we just want to get a sense, how often are those businesses essentially taking out a few walls and putting in a header, which is structural framing work, versus are they doing tile work, are they changing out a vanity, et cetera?
So the reassuring part is that they're coming from these 501c3s, okay? And you might want to explain that. I know a little bit about that, but I know that, it's a pretty strong rigor in terms of what you have to maintain for government in terms of remaining and sustaining yourself as a nonprofit. So they're getting funding based on, what? Entities that are
Grants and
trying to help certain communities?
Yes.
And we're drawing from those so that there's eyes on this type of
Correct.
thing.
And the purpose of teaming up with the Day Labor Center is to get to the people who are doing the work. Just because those are the individuals coming to those centers each day.
Yeah, but also, I just want to comment that we're also looking at Craigslist and different
Yes, we are.
media that the public are using to get multi-trade small jobs performed. And I think when he's mentioning private enterprise, he's talking about the National Association of Remodeling Industry. These different groups that are doing the kitchen and bathroom remodel that may not have a significant structural component to it. So we're just, what he's really getting at is trying to determine if there's a need for a multi-trade class that would do perhaps the smaller projects.
Correct.
Go ahead, Linda.
We've been discussing this for a while, so can we set a date to that we definitely get some kind of information back to us, whether it's to the next committee meeting or to the next board meeting, maybe not June, but the first fall one, like you're saying?
I'd be happy to.
Some kind of
My
action.
concern would just be response rate and getting those materials, but I'd be happy to entertain that. I can certainly provide whatever data I have available by the fall meeting.
It seems like word of mouth seems to be a lot of ways some of these unlicensed
Yes.
contractors travel, and those are the toughest group to get to, obviously. Is there any other board member have a comment?
Frank, yeah, quick question. What's the dollar amount? What's the threshold we're talking about here?
That's part of the survey as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other comments from board? Okay, this is not an action item for the committee. And we have had public comments. Is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which would be adjournment.
So moved.
So moved.
Will you take a 10-minute break?
Yeah, we'll take, after this, after we call roll, we'll take a 10-minute break.
Frank Shetter,
Aye.
Frank Alatamura, absent, sorry, David De La Torre.
Aye.
Joan Hancock.
Aye.
Michael Layton. Nancy Springer. Motion passes.
We're adjourned.
Was that David that did the first motion on that? Was it David? Okay.
Meeting of the Contractor State License Board. My name is Kevin Albanese, and I am the Enforcement Committee Chair. Becky, can you please start by calling roll and establishing a quorum?
Kevin Albanese.
Here.
Augie Beltran.
Here.
Linda Clifford.
Linda.
Linda Clifford. Oh, I'm sorry.
Here.
Okay. David Diaz.
Here.
Susan Granzella. Here. Johnny Simpson. A quorum has been established.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Because this is a new committee, I'd like to invite the committee members and staff to introduce themselves. So I'll start to my right with the chair. Registrar.
David Foat, Registrar.
Johnny Simpson, Board Member.
Dave Diaz, Board Member.
Rick Lopes, Chief of Public Affairs.
Missy Vickery, Chief of Enforcement. Becky Like, Enforcement Analyst.
Tanya Corcoran, Chief Deputy Registrar.
Christy Shields, counsel for the board.
Augie Beltran, Board Member.
Susan Granzella, Board Member. Linda Clifford, Board Member.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. We are on to Agenda Item B, our public comment section. But before we get there, we do have a special guest. Our Chair of the Board, Marlo Richardson, is here to do a quick presentation. Marlo, can you come on up? You want her back here? Why don't you come back here?
Good morning. I was kind of looking forward to standing at the podium. I never get to do that. Anyhow, I flew in this morning from Los Angeles because someone very special is going to be departing, and I just wanted to make a few comments about Miss Linda Clifford and today's final meeting for her. So for the past 6 years, Linda has served as the A General Contracting licensed member of the board. And during her time on the board, Linda was a strong voice for the contractor and even a stronger voice for the consumers. We're all here to serve and protect. We truly benefited by being able to tap Linda's experience working in the construction industry and thank her for her willingness to share and for taking on leadership roles. Over the past 6 years, Linda represented CSLB as a commissioner for the California Uniform Construction Cost Accounting Commission, serving as the chair in 2015 and 2016. Linda also chaired both the licensing and legislative committees. She also served on an advisory panel to help the board develop building permit compliance strategies. I'm especially thankful for Linda serving on the board, the executive board, with me as the board secretary, and it's really sad to see her leave right now. I appreciate all of the experience that you brought to the board, all of the advice you gave, all of the willingness to give advice, especially to me as a newer member. And I'm going to be very sad to see you go, but I know that as long as you're in California, you're not going to be too far away. So I hope that you continue to be in contact with not just the rest of us, but me. So where's the plaque? This plaque is presented to Linda Clifford, board member from 2013 to 2019, in recognition of your outstanding contributions to the Contractor State License Board, the people of California, and the construction industry. Thank you for a job well done.
Thank you. Okay, Rick, that's enough. Jeez. Give it a rest. Let's hope. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Outstanding. All right, thank you, Marlo, and thank you for making the trip up to recognize Linda. We are at Agenda Item B, our public comment section.
I think some board member has something they wanted to comment about. This is the appropriate time for that.
For Linda's departure.
So upon hearing upon your departure from our board, I was saddened, but I can't let you go without saying just a few things. First of all, you have been such a great leader. For me, I just want to point out a few things that I heard Marlo say. You used the word strong several different times in sentences defining your role and participation on the board. You're a very strong leader. You're a very strong woman. You've been an incredible role model for women in the construction industry, and I'm really grateful for that and grateful for you being on the board. And what you brought to this board was a level of intelligence. You've elevated this board in every committee you sat on, but this board as a whole. For me personally, experiencing you in several different leadership roles, I thought probably bar none, you have been a person that has been able to work on both sides of the aisle, bringing the industry, bringing labor, and always coming out as the one that mediates no matter what the discrepancy is. I honor you, I respect you, and I wish you well. Thank you, Linda.
Any other comments?
Okay, I have to comment. When I came on the board, I will admit at this point, it's been 4 years, I knew nothing. And Linda was a mentor in a way that was significant, suggesting that I do things like join the licensing committee or perhaps chair it. And I said, you know, I don't think I can do that. And she said, no, you can, you're going to. And it was just wonderful, that confidence and being able to watch how you work. So thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your leadership. And if I ever find myself on opposite sides of the table negotiating with you, I'll just give it up then. You are as tough as they come with diplomacy, but also with your rhetoric and your ability to communicate about all sides. So thank you very much.
I'd like to just say a couple of words. I just really thank Linda for always going the extra mile to help staff. I have to admit, I've sent her emails at 10 o'clock at night, get a response from Linda. And she's been very effective in working with different groups, such as the North Coast Builders Exchange and other industry groups. Linda always calls it like it is. She understands that there are limitations on what we can do, but she's always been willing to share her insight and help us to do a better job. So thank you, Linda.
All right. Linda, thank you again for your service. Next is agenda item B, our public comment section. I'm going to abbreviate these admonishments because I think everybody's been here for the first 2 meetings. We're going to limit public comment to 5 minutes apiece. State law prohibits committee members from taking any action on any items not on the agenda. If you'd like something on the agenda, now would be a good time to bring it up. If you have an application, complaint, or a discriminatory or disciplinary action pending before the board, please do not discuss those details now, as we're not permitted to receive evidence outside of the administrative record. And we will also ask for public comment during each of the specific agenda items. So if you want to talk about a specific agenda item, it may be best to wait for that item's time on the agenda. So at this point, I will ask for public or board comment about any new items on a future agenda meeting or any other public comment at this time. Seeing and hearing none, we're going to run to agenda item C, the prioritization guidelines. This item starts on page 47 of the packet with the background of the necessary reexamination of the CSLB's published complaint priority guidelines. During the Sunset Review, the legislature specifically asked the following questions. How are complaints and cases prioritized? What is our prioritization policy? And is it different from DCA's complaint prioritization guidelines for healthcare agencies? At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Chief of Enforcement, Missy Vickery, to provide some further background and details of the proposed complaint prioritization guidelines.
Thank you, Chair Albanese. On page 47, you'll see the prioritization chart that was developed by the board and adopted by them in 2013. Staff recognized the need to update the chart to reflect the current workload and priorities. There are many things on this chart that are important, but we also recognize the need to come into compliance with current priorities, such as workers' compensation, misuse of license, and diversion of funds. Additionally, the chart that you see on page 47 identifies a complaint source. While complaint source is sometimes a consideration in a case for prioritization, it's not always relevant. On page 49 of your packet, you will see a new chart, a new complaint prioritization chart that more accurately captures current board priorities. The chart is developed into 4 categories that clearly indicate simply how each complaint could be prioritized. Those categories are urgent, high, routine, and low. The color coding of the columns makes it easier to understand and follow. The chart has twice as many categories as previously. It previously had 11, it now has 21. The complaint source has already been removed, also been removed from the chart. This chart is more in line to what other medical and health-related boards for the DCA already utilize. So it's similar to theirs. One of the things you'll notice on page 49 is it says media politically sensitive cases. We're going to suggest removing that and replacing it with significant public interest. This will be more in line than what is previously stated there. So staff believes that the proposed complaint prioritization guidelines chart with the minor change more accurately reflects the board's objectives and priorities and recommends the enforcement committee recommend to the full board the adoption of the proposed complaint prioritization chart.
Thank you very much. Is there any committee comment or discussion on this new proposed prioritization guideline?
Yes, I have a question. Missy, can you very briefly, in line with Chair Albanese's instructions, very briefly describe how this list will be created and maintained? Is it that you present this to the committee and it is then brought to the board, how an item may be either removed or added? How is that managed?
Okay, so this is the chart we're recommending that the committee adopt and move to the full board. And then at that time, this will be handed out to staff through staff meetings. And when we get complaints in, and sometimes we have too many complaints, so we utilize this to recognize what complaints should be handled first and foremost for consumer protection, such as if it's a health and safety related complaint or elder abuse, that would be at the top. So supervisors, managers, and staff would know that. Then we also have other complaints that come in that are of the lower priority. Perhaps it's an advertisement complaint, which you can see is in a low, or a bond complaint. So last year you heard us talk about, we had many complaints and high caseloads as a result of staff turnover and redirection of staff at local assistance centers to help with disaster recovery. So when we have too many complaints and if we were unable to address some of those complaints, this would help us identify which complaints would be set as the lowest priority that we may not be able to get to.
So you're envisioning that this would be more or less a permanent list that we would operate by, and that committee and board approval would be needed to make changes to the priorities?
Correct.
Okay, good, thanks.
Dave, do you have something?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. The one you're going to change, the media politically sensitive cases, you're going to change that to something else, correct?
Yes, significant public interest. An example of that would be a pool company goes out of business and we see it on the news, but we don't have as many complaints today. It helps us gear up and identify possible consumers who may have suffered financial harm, maybe get together a task force who's going to handle those complaints. Or we all heard about the victims in Huron who were victims of solar scams. It helps us prioritize those so we can get what resources are needed to those communities.
Yeah, I get that. I was just actually asking, so this will have to be amended before we vote on it, correct?
Well, the recommendation is that we amend it and move it for the next.
Well, that's what I'm
board meeting.
saying, yeah,
Yes.
but that's still gonna have to be amended before we move it up to the.
We're just going to do that verbally.
Yeah, okay.
So,
I'm just making
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
right.
And then the other one is like predatory criminal acts. I mean, this is for just the staff, correct? So they know what comes under that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
any other board comment? Any public comment? So then, I'd like to ask for a motion from the Enforcement Committee to recommend for full board approval to adopt the proposed complaint prioritization guideline chart on page 49, eliminating the media politically sensitive cases with the phrase significant public interest.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further board comment? Any further public comment before we take a vote? Becky, roll call vote, please.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Linda Clifford. David Diaz.
All right,
Susan Granzola. Johnny Simpson. Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item D on page 53. CSLB is one of 15 state and federal agencies that make up the Joint Enforcement Strike Force, which is led by the Employee Development Department. JESF is charged with combating the underground economy by pooling resources and sharing data among the member agencies. CSLB's statewide investigative fraud team, also known as SWIFT, plays a vital role in supporting these enforcement efforts. In 2018, SWIFT performed 79 stings and 388 sweeps, resulting in 1,728 administrative and criminal legal action proceedings and an assessment of 809,000 non-licensee citation civil penalties. In addition, CSLB has the authority to suspend a license if the licensee is delinquent in paying outstanding liabilities due to CSLB or other state agencies. If you look at the chart on page 55, CSLB collected or resolved nearly $25 million in liabilities owed to state agencies in 2018. I'm now going to turn the discussion over to Missy to talk further about CSLB's continued efforts regarding mandatory workers' compensation and the renewed MOU between CSLB and the EDD.
Thank you, Chair Albanese. CSLB continues to address the issue of workers' comp avoidance through discussions with State Compensation Insurance Fund, as well as other interested state agencies and partners. This component of the underground economy is of great interest to the members of Justice, and as such, Registrar Foat was invited to give a presentation at the April 11th JUSF meeting. JUSF members expressed their support for the proposal to mandate workers' comp coverage for other classifications specified. We haven't determined what those are yet, and offered ideas to increase compliance. Those ideas can be found on page 55 and 56 of your packet, but they include the suggestion to collaborate with Workers' Comp Insurance Rating Bureau to identify contractors underreporting payroll and to support a legislative proposal that would require someone who's found with a false exemption, it would prohibit them from filing another exemption for a period of 1 year. California Department of Insurance reported that $40 million in grants have been awarded to DA offices to combat workers' comp insurance fraud for the next year. So we look forward to working with our partners and our CDI investigators in our enforcement efforts. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you very much for that. Any public comment or board comment on the enforcement program update that concludes at page 56, or the MOU with EDD? Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, on page 56 of your packet, you'll see on September 11th, we entered into a new 3-year MOU, Memorandum of Understanding with EDD, to increase our enforcement efforts between the two agencies. It allows for joint prosecution of businesses that violate state laws and regulations. The agreement also defines the joint responsibilities, including the requirement of 2 minimum joint investigation days per month. Presently, we have 8 teams out doing as much as 16 investigations per month. That concludes my update.
Public comment or board comment? Seeing and hearing none, we are at the agenda item to adjourn. So can I have a motion and a
So
second to
moved.
adjourn?
Second.
All right. Becky, roll call vote, please.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Linda Clifford.
Aye.
David Diaz.
Yes.
Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Fantastic. We are adjourned. The legislative meeting will start at 10:50 in approximately 5 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Linda Clifford. I'm the committee chair. You've already heard that only board members who are members of the committee can participate, and don't bring anything up that's not on the agenda, but if you want to bring it up and get it on a future agenda, that's fine. Also, don't bring up anything that has to do with a specific complaint or situation. Phyllis, you want to call us in for quorum?
Linda Clifford,
Here?
Kevin Albanese,
Here.
Augie Bergeron,
Here.
David Diaz,
Here.
Susan Granzella,
Here.
Johnny Simpson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. This session, this portion right now is for public comment of anything that's not on the agenda. So if there's anyone who would like to come up and make a public comment, please come now. Seeing none, then we will move forward to the first agenda item, which is a long and I just don't know why you decided on my last one to have 12 bills, but anyway, just to really, give me a lot of practice on the way out. So, anyway, this is reviewed, discussion, and possible action on the 2019-2020 pending legislation. And for those of you who have a packet in front of you, you can see that there's 12 bills on there that we're going to be taking a look at today. The goal is to do this in the most organized way possible. So in order to avoid making 12 motions, and this is for the pleasure of the committee, but in order to keep from making 12 motions, we're proposing that we take a look at the bills that we're supporting, and we make a motion to support those if that's the committee's pleasure. Then we take a look at the bills that we're watching, and we make a motion on those, and then we take a look at the bills that we're opposing. And obviously, it's the committee's pleasure to change any one of those approaches. We may change and approve to watch, or watch to oppose, or whatever. We've asked the staff to help us with recommendations, and so they have provided those for our consideration. So,
Through the chair, I'd make a motion to support the bills 1 through 5 as shown on page 67.
Second.
okay, so because we need public comment and committee comment, we'll go for it, okay? So, AB 193, Patterson Professions and Vocations, can I?
We have a motion, so I would suggest you ask for public comment or board comment on any one of those 5 as part of that motion.
Okay, all right, so any public, what? Yes, so this is AB 193, AB 613, AB 1551, and SB 601.
Madam Chairwoman?
Yes.
I think our attorney's got a comment.
Okay,
So, I don't know, I mean, I would think you would want at least to refresh the recollection of the committee members as to what these bills involve before you vote on them, but if you're not going to do that, I do have some questions I'd like you to consider for AB 193. So AB 193 is a bill that would require the Department of Consumer Affairs to review the license requirements of every board and bureau and identify unnecessary requirements. It would also require the board to report certain data elements every year, or biannually, sorry. My concern, or something I'd like you to consider, is how comfortable you are with the department determining what licensing requirements in your act are unnecessary. I do know that some of my clients are concerned about that, and they would at least like to have input on what is necessary or unnecessary in their own laws. So just for your consideration, that was a concern that was brought forward at one of my board meetings, and I wanted you to know about that. I also wondered if there were going to be any problems with the data elements that they're requiring you to report. I don't know if staff have any concerns about that.
The first comment I'll make is that it's now a 2-year bill, meaning that a 2-year bill is a bill that failed to meet the policy committee deadlines by the September 13th interim recess. So all that means is that after September 13th, it could be a totally different bill, and it has to get out of House by January 31st or it's dead. So that's issue number one. Issue number two, what Christie mentioned is that the bill on page 73, line 32, what it would require of the board is that beginning on February 1st, 2021, and every 2 years thereafter, the CSLB, which is one of the boards identified in section 101, shall submit to DCA an assessment of our policies for facilitating licensure portability for active duty service members, veterans, and military spouses. So that would be the provision I think council is pointing to us that we, if we have any thoughts about that.
Well, and to that end, Michael, the stuff that's required in the report every 2 years is lines 1 through 21 on page 74.
That's right. It's clarifying what the licensure portability is for military spouses and veterans.
Right. What's included in the report. So committee comment to the two things that, I mean, the first one you raised is a good one. I'm not interested in having DCA necessarily tell us something's unnecessary if we think it is necessary.
I know there's a motion on the floor, but I think we should, since it is a 2-year bill, it'd probably be smart just to go to watch. Because if it does change and we're in support of something that changes, we don't want to do that. So that would be my comment.
I feel the same way. Can we get a change to the motion?
Before
Yes.
you go there, since it's a group, there's the second bill, there's 2 bills that I have comments on.
All right.
The second one is AB 613, which would authorize the board to raise licensing fees once every 4 years, consistent with increases in the California Consumer Price Index. The concern I have about that bill is it has some language in it that says, notwithstanding any other law, and I'm looking at page 84, lines 3 and 4 of the bill. It says, notwithstanding any other law, no more than once every 4 years, any board may increase any fee authorized to be imposed by that board by an amount not to exceed the increase in the California Consumer Price Index. My concern is, well, what if you have some budgetary or operational need to increase it above the Consumer Price Index? With this bill, it doesn't really address your ability to increase the fee above that if you need to for operational needs. And so, I mean, it's not a big criticism, but I'm just worried that it's, with the notwithstanding any other law, it usually means, despite what it says anywhere else, you can only increase your fees once every 4 years, consistent with the Consumer Price Index. So while I like the convenience of being able to just do it every 4 years as the index changes, I would like to see some language in here that reserves the right to increase fees if you have certain operational needs that go above that index.
I guess my only question to that, if we were to raise fees, we would need a statutory change anyway, right?
No, it'd be regulatory. You'd have to go through regulatory process to increase fees, but it doesn't address that. So my concern is that notwithstanding any other law usually means, despite what your other authority says, like right now you have authority to increase fees, there's a range in the statute, and right now we're at the bottom of that range. So if we want to go above that range, we need to go through a formal rulemaking process.
Right.
I would like to
Okay, I gotcha.
continue to reserve that authority to you. And this statute, it looks like it might supersede that authority, and that's what I'm concerned about.
Augie?
Is it a 2-year bill? Did they move it to 2 years?
Actually, this one's moving pretty quick. It's already in the second house. It's in Senate B and P, so it is an assembly bill that's now in the Senate committee.
Who's the sponsor?
It's author sponsored. It's Low.
Okay, so I think my suggestion on this one would be oppose unless amend.
Well, or you could do a support if amended. Because, I mean, I like the idea
That's a
of being
soft
able to
support.
increase.
That's a soft oppose. I mean, we could do that, but if it's in the second house, is it going to go into suspense?
At this time, I don't have any indication that it will.
Okay, so depending on how tough we want to be, we can do oppose unless amend, which gets chief in the door real quick. A soft support unless amend. I mean, it kind of says the same thing, but it kind of puts us in the back seat instead of the front seat. So my suggestion would be oppose unless amend.
And I would
So we
only,
end up-
I'd only mention in case it's relevant for any of the members that Assembly BMP did reach out to us and ask us to consider supporting the bill. I don't know, I just thought I would throw that out there.
I mean, a support if amended would be a softer way to approach it. I mean, I like the idea of being able to increase your fees without going through rulemaking, but I just want to clarify the language so it's, that notwithstanding doesn't supersede any other authority we might have, and that might just be something they could drop a sentence into
Yeah.
to fix.
And I
Through
think
the
other,
chair.
Yes.
So what are the odds that they'll accept our amendment? Pretty good?
I think so, and I think other boards have pointed out the question that Christie has brought to our attention.
Okay, then I'm with the soft support again, unless amend.
Okay, so
Or-
are there any other issues that you have, Christie?
No, not with those 5.
Are there any other issues that the committee has, or Michael?
I just thought I would mention that, you mentioned the bulk support for those 5 bills. AB 1551 is also a 2-year bill. So the way that we've suggested the motion be crafted is support the language, or support the, as written, in case these bills are changed. But AB 1551 is also a 2-year bill, so it may be something else in a few months as well.
Okay, so
So-
I really want to back off and do, we actually have 3 different types of bills right now. We have those that we're supporting, we have the ones that are 2-year that we're supporting if they don't change, and we have the support if amended, right? So we have three areas on 5 bills. So I think, we can vote on the motion or we can amend the motion.
Well, the other thing too is that if it's a 2-year bill, we shouldn't support, we should watch, really. Yeah, so if I may, Madam Chair?
Yes.
If you ask the maker of the motion to withdraw his motion and the maker of the second to do that, and then we just take one bill at a time, we'll knock them out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can I get a withdrawal, please? So,
I will withdraw. I'd suggest that we amend it, but I'd be more than happy to withdraw it if that's the committee's preference.
I'd like to make the comment, Mike, if you could, I know it's rapidly changing, but where we are on the timeline, if it's a 2-year or whatever, that would help in our review of the summaries. Summaries are great, and there's some additional information, but knowing it's a 2-year or it's about to go to vote will impact our resolution often of what we recommend. So if you could, in some way that is comfortable, to include that in the future.
Absolutely, I think a handout would have been helpful with those updates, because you're right, they do, a lot of these are being heard today, they've been changed in the last few days. This packet was written a couple weeks ago.
before we get to our motions that we know exactly where all the bills are, because I agree with Anya, I think moving the 2 years to watches is a really good idea. So we'll probably, when we go to the watch, let's talk about that too. Is there any public comment? Okay, so I would like to get a motion.
Motion that we move AB 193 to watch.
Second.
Any discussion? Any public discussion? Any committee discussion? Phyllis, for the vote?
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese,
Yes.
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Dave Diaz,
Yes.
Susan Granzella,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, move to AB 613 to soft support unless amend.
Support unless amended, is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Second, Dave Diaz down here?
If amended.
Okay. Any, what?
If amended.
If amended, right. Support if amended.
Right.
Okay. And that's second also. Okay. Committee comment? Public comment? The vote.
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese,
Aye.
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Dave Diaz,
Yes.
Susan Granzella,
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair. Move AB 1551 to watch.
Second.
Any committee comment? Any public comment? The vote.
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese,
Aye.
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Dave Diaz,
Yes.
Susan Granzella, Johnny Simpson? Motion passes.
Madam Chair, move SB 601 to support.
Any committee comment on this one? We have not discussed this at all, but any public comment? The vote?
Linda Clifford?
Aye?
Kevin Albanese? Augie Beltran?
Aye.
Dave Diaz? Susan Granzella? Johnny Simpson? Motion passes.
Madam Chair, SB 610 is our support of Sunset, so move that we support.
Second.
Committee comment? This is on our sunset bill. Public comment? Phyllis?
Linda Clifford?
Aye?
Kevin Albanese? Augie Beltran?
Aye.
Dave Diaz?
Yes.
Susan Granzella? Johnny Simpson? Motion passes.
Thank you. We're now going to move to the bills that staff has recommended as watched. This is AB 1076, criminal offender records be sealed. SB 255, to require the CSLB to assist the Public Utilities Commission in identifying distributed energy resource contractors. SB 556, PAN, clarifies and modernizes the Professional Land Surveyors Act to establish a clear line as to when licensed professional land surveyors are required on project. And so those are three, the extra bills that we already moved to watch. These are three additional bills moved to watch. Mike, do you want to just give us any update as to timing on the bills or where they are?
Sure. So all three are set to be heard on Thursday, actually, so no major changes to their status. I would just mention, well, if there's questions, we can address.
I just want to bring to your attention that what the legal effect of this bill will be is going to be essentially to erase the convictions from the rap sheet, so you won't get any notice of certain convictions or arrests. One thing we spoke about at a committee meeting earlier this morning was your most wanted list, but a lot of the arrests would be removed if a year has passed without a conviction. But that doesn't take into consideration people who flee the state or are not able to be caught. They have an arrest warrant out and they're not caught and they're not convicted because, you know, they skip bail, they left the state. So under this bill, it would just be automatically removed if they're not convicted within 1 year after they've gotten arrested. So that's kind of concerning from a public protection perspective. In addition, if somebody has a misdemeanor and they are not convicted within a year, I think, of the passing of the judgment, those would also be removed from the rap sheet. Felony convictions resulting in county jail, they would be automatically erased after 2 years have passed since the sentence.
It doesn't matter what the felony is?
No. I mean, there's some sex offender, I think, right? There's some sex offender exceptions, but you deal with a lot of variety of crimes, a lot of them financial crimes, embezzlement. You know, those unlicensed activity cases you're so proud of, they would go by the wayside. So someone you've convicted yourselves, you've brought forward a case forward, will be erased from the record and will not be on the rap sheet when you run them, when they come back for licensure again. So it's a little concerning to me. I realize it's not something directly in your business and professions code, but the effect will be tremendous on your enforcement program, in my opinion, and even your public affairs program. So.
You talked to staff yet, Chief?
For AB 1076, I haven't spoken with the author's office.
Okay, and that's author-driven?
Yes, and Ting is chair of the Budget Committee.
Yeah.
So we anticipate a large AG fiscal, but also there are some concerns with the bill. There's some issue about the AG's office not having all the resources it needs to actually do what this bill requires. There's a lot of holes in the information that they have on these records already, so it's kind of not clear what's going to happen next.
So
with
what's
this
the AG's office doing?
They haven't come out publicly that I'm aware of. There's no fiscal from them yet, and they've not stated a position.
Counselor, is there any language that would fix this bill? Any amends?
It's kind of what we don't know what we don't know with this bill, what they removed from the
I
record.
can't see, I mean, from a public protection perspective, we've always had all of the information provided, and then you decide on a case-by-case basis whether you think the person's been rehabilitated and they're safe to practice with safety to the public. So what this bill would do is you wouldn't even get the conviction information because it'll be erased from the record. So they'll have been convicted, but you won't have the history.
So with respect, I think we have enough ammunition to oppose.
I think so too, because we just got through having a conversation on this subject and saying 7 years or 5 years was going to be the time that we felt like if nothing happened and there was no, that would be something we would consider. And we went along with the bill we weren't terribly happy with because it gave us enough time to really see whether a person was or had some trend towards a better, outcome. And this, a year, there'll be people who will not be prosecuted in a year. It doesn't happen in a year. People have sat in jail, right or wrong, they have sat in jail for a really long time. So, or not, or they've left. And so it doesn't get prosecuted. So even the time frame just feels totally out of sync.
I think it's time to draw a line in the sand.
Right.
I'd like to make a motion that we oppose.
Second.
Committee comment? Public comment?
Good morning. Ooh, that's right. Good morning, Phil Vermeulen, Contractor Licensing Center. We have a lot of involvement, as Justin knows, with live scans. I'm not a big fan of live scans. Right now, we've got a FBI bureaucracy. I've got several clients that have been held up 3-4 weeks waiting for the FBI on something that's done by a computer. This is why the construction industry opposed live scans back when they were trying to do it back in 2000, beginning of 2000, around in there, and eventually came into pass in 2005. It's just frustrating. Another concern I have is I've had clients, we always ask them, now, have you ever had any kind of arrest whatsoever? No. Well, it turns out a lot of these people have had expungements, or so they thought were expungements. But there is no such thing as expungements with these stupid live scans. It shows up. Now, somebody who thought that they were expunged files, and then all of a sudden the application is voided. I've had many clients that have had voided applications because they didn't disclose something that they thought was expunged. It's been a nightmare. So my point in this whole thing is to agree that we oppose that bill. I think it's just going to cause a lot more confusion and then figure out a way we can get these live scans done on a timely basis, because we're talking about people's livelihoods. And for no reason at all being held up, and then finally all of a sudden magically appears 3, 4, 5 weeks out, they clear. And you just go, wow, why was this thing held up so long? So just something that Justin is very much aware of this. I send him little love notes by email all the time about it, about my feelings. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any other public comment? The vote?
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Dave Diaz.
Yes.
Susan Granzella. Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, so SB 255, which is the business enterprise procurement, having to do with electric service providers, the energy storage system companies, and community choice aggregates. This is also on the watch, and then SB 556, the professional land surveyor. So those are the only two remaining for watch. Do we have any comments on those bills? Christie, no comments on those bills? Okay, so,
Through the chair, I make a motion to put both of those on watch.
Second.
committee comment? Public comment? The vote?
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Dave Diaz.
Yes.
Susan Granzella. Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, we're now moving to the bills that staff recommends that we consider for opposing. So AB 544, professions and vocations, inactive license fees and accrued and unpaid renewal fees. It would reduce the fee to reactivate an inactive license by 50%. AB 1024, home inspectors licensing, Contractor State License Board would require, beginning January 1, 2022, a person who performs home inspections to obtain a license from the CSLB. AB 1545, civil penalty reduction, would require an agency that significantly regulates small business to assist small businesses in complying with the agency's laws and with any enforcement action taken by the agency, and would require the agency to establish a policy to reduce civil penalties for a small business's violation of the agency's requirements. SB 53, open meetings, would subject a two-person advisory committee of a state board to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. So unless there's something that we want to pull off.
AB 1024 is a 2-year bill now. So I think we should go to watch on that one because it's in movement, or it's in.
The home inspectors,
it's
are we
being
ever
worked in.
going to really support it, though?
Well, it may turn into something else.
Right, okay.
Well, you can always change your position too later.
Right.
when,
Yeah, but I think we should go watch on this.
Okay. So you want to pull that out by motion? Is there anything else we want to pull out?
Yeah, that's the only one I care about right now.
Okay.
Just through the chair, could the staff just explain the reasoning that they're recommending the opposition for these bills, so we have a record, public record for the author to know why you're opposing these issues? I mean,
It's in the, I think it's
I
contained
just
in the
want to
written
make sure
docs.
that the board members are aware
I
of
mean,
why
some
the
of them are
staff's-
pretty obvious, but.
Okay.
But however, if,
Sure. So 544, the opposition is mainly because it would hit us at $300,000 a year fiscally. And 1024, the initial opposition was simply because home inspection is a fundamentally different task than contracting. And then SB 53, 1545, it's our position, so the Civil Penalty Reduction Act, it's our position that our citation program already benefits small business with how we operate. Reduction of civil penalties further when we already have a letter of admonishment for education and the citation settlement program. We already do work with small businesses, and we're trying to level the playing field. So this would actually affect our ability to do that. And then SB 53, that would subject our two-person advisory committees to the Open Meeting Act and require formal notice for meetings. That would hamper a lot of our routine efforts here. That we, the board members are tasked to go out and fact find and report information back to the board. And if we have to convene a meeting or public notice every time that we want to get members involved, it would really hamper our operations here.
I'd move to oppose 544, AB 544, AB 1545, and Senate Bill 53 to the full
Second.
board.
so,
All but AB 1024.
okay, which we're watching.
Well, we'll make a motion on that.
Okay. All right, can I get a second? Okay, committee? Michael, do you have a comment?
I was just going to state for the board's information, we've done a lot of work with both Assembly on AB 1024, the home inspection. Just to, for your edification, we've worked directly with Assembly BMP and Senate BMP and the author's office. And while I wouldn't state that I have a crystal ball, I think it's reasonable to assume that home inspections probably won't land at CSLB. We've really done a lot of work to advise them about what the ramifications of that would be.
And the conflict.
And the
inherent
conflict. What happens if your contractor schedules an inspection and then schedules the work for that inspection? So,
Yeah. And we don't need to feed that. Public comment? The vote?
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese. Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Dave Diaz. Susan Granzella. Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, move AB 1024 to watch.
Second.
Committee comment? Public comment? The vote?
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Yes.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Dave Diaz.
Yes.
Susan Granzella. Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you for your patience in going through all of those bills. We're going to move to agenda item D, which is review and discussion, possible action on the legislative proposal to seek continuous appropriation for the construction management education account. And for those of you who have been here throughout the day, you heard this discussion at the licensing committee also. So our goal is to move this forward. On page 215, you have the same information pretty much that you got during the earlier committee, which is to allow the board to grant all but $50,000 in the CMA account to the schools each year without seeking annual budget authority from the legislature. So, Michael, do you want to give us a little bit more information?
Sure, yeah. So folks were here this morning. I think we'll just state that this morning the licensing committee approved a motion that would request this committee to propose to the full board a proposal that would seek the continuous appropriation and maintain the $50,000 reserve. So that's what we're doing here. I think we already discussed the purpose this morning.
So
Right.
moved. Second.
Okay. Any committee comment?
Can
This
I-
is a good thing. We want to get this out. Yes.
Can I get clarification? So
Yes.
is that the motion as the staff has recommended in the packet? Or is that the motion that he mentioned about the legislative committee recommending? So I'm just trying to get clear what the motion actually is.
The motion's for the Ledge Committee to recommend to the full board to seek continuous appropriation from the Ledge that will allow us to spend all but $50,000 in the CEMA account. Was that the second?
So clarification noted. Again, committee comment, public comment? The vote?
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese.
Aye.
Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Dave Diaz.
Aye.
Susan Granzella. Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
So we're going to move to agenda item E, which is review, discussion, and possible action to recommend to the board initiation of a rulemaking to add Title 16, California Code of Regulations, 16 CCR, Section 832.49, to create a new license classification, C-49, for tree and palm contractors. And you guys may remember that at our April 2018 meeting, the board adopted a motion to develop a specialty C license for the tree service and/or arborist work. Currently, the following license classifications can perform C-27 and C-61-/T-49. So at the September 2018 board meeting, Chair Frank Schetter reported that the staff would hold stakeholder meetings. So that has occurred. Mike, do you want to have that conversation?
Yeah, I think the only thing to point out with this agenda item is a typo on the bottom of page 222. The staff recommendation is for the legislative committee's recommendation, not the licensing committee's recommendation.
Right.
But other than that, yeah, yes, that's all.
So I'll take a motion.
I did have one question on this one before we go. The tree palm contract, this is looking at the definition on page 222, the regulation subparagraph A. My understanding is the license board is that the license law applies to trees over 15 feet tall. And is that, so would this would only apply to those trees and palms in excess of 15 feet? Is that accurate? And is that already stated in the law, or is it more appropriate to restate that here?
So we can clarify it and state it here for the presentation of the full board. That's fine. It actually is already a part of the law, but it's fine to put that clarification here as well.
I think we should.
I think for the public, when people start doing their 70-31 war games, they're gonna go to this, oh, it was a tree and it's, I think for the public edification, I think it'd be a little bit clearer. We're not changing anything, but it's just clarification.
What I would request, Christie, go on.
So you put the clarification after removes trees, so in trees in excess of 15 feet
Tall.
and palms, because I don't think the 15 feet applies to palms, right?
Well, it's a little complicated.
Oh, it is? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Get it?
Just for the committee's background, palms aren't technically trees. So I think it's probably more appropriate, but if to put the 15 feet at the end. But Christie does raise an interesting point, and I haven't done the research to make sure this would apply to palms. If the committee's comfortable with it, we could basically make an alteration that would either go after trees or after palms, and then we would just report to the full board in June what's the most prudent based on our research.
I would recommend both. I mean, if somebody's planting a 4-foot palm tree, I don't think we care. My suggestion to the committee would be just to apply this only to trees and palms that are in excess of 15 feet tall.
Is the question whether it applies to palms all the time, or there isn't clarification on when it applies to palms?
Just to also clarify, when I was first asked the question about the 15 feet, I can say assertively today it applies to trees. There's just been with our research, there's been this wrinkle.
Yeah.
So I don't know if existing law says that for palms, but if the committee's comfortable, we can essentially, Christie's shaking her head, no. But if the committee's comfortable with it, we can make the decision here today to make it apply to palms.
I think that's a good idea.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Because those palms are deadly, man. I shimmied up one of my palms, almost killed myself, so.
I thought I would read the definition in 7026.1. The term contractor does not include a gardener who in the normal course of routine work performs incidental pruning of trees measuring less than 15 feet in height after planting. That's the law.
So we want it to apply to palms. So do we need to change the motion, or where do we put the 15 feet in? Trees over
Well, if you
15 feet
wanted to-
and palms? Or,
Trees and palms in excess of, it says under 15? I have to go back.
in excess of 15.
Incidental pruning of trees measuring less than 15 feet.
Okay, so it's 15 feet or higher.
Yes, that's
That
correct.
you have authority over for trees. You have authority for any height for palms, but you want to self-restrict to 15 and higher? Okay, so then it would be a tree and palm contractor plants, maintains, and removes trees and palms in excess of 15 feet. But the thing with that is
15
this.
feet or higher.
At 15 feet or higher, sorry,
Yes. Yeah.
15 feet or higher. The problem with that is, it sounds like they can't do anything lower than that when you write it like that. So maybe we need to go back and rework the text to say that it doesn't affect the ability, the exempt,
Right, so
classification.
to Christie's point, you may still want to hire this individual to
To
install
do-
something that's at 4 feet.
That's less
Right.
than 15 feet, so.
And if the committee's comfortable, I think I see where the committee wants to go. I'm happy to present to the full board. I'm
So
pretty clear where.
Perhaps direct staff to come back with text that addresses the committee's concerns about clarifying that anything, they're not required to have the license classification when it involves a tree or a palm 15 feet, under 15 feet.
Yes, Johnny.
I really don't think that's that hard. Nothing in this section would stop a C-49 contractor from working on trees shorter than 15. This isn't that big a deal, so if we can go ahead and take the motion today and with language to do that. Would anything be wrong with that?
I wouldn't want to put words in stakeholders' mouth, but I think Johnny's correct. I'm happy after this meeting to just check in with the stakeholders who've been assisting me in this development, and we could just see if there's any issue, and I could report that to the board.
So let's repeat the motion, what we're going to actually say in the motion today, with the understanding you're going to talk to the stakeholders, and there's a possibility that at the board meeting in June, when this comes up for a vote,
Right.
there could be a further discussion of some nuances, right? So can we restate the motion, please?
The motion is to adopt staff recommendation, move this to the full board, clarifying that this only applies to trees or palms 15 feet or higher in height.
And the second is, okay. So any further committee comment? Any public comment on this issue? Okay, the vote?
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese,
Aye.
Augie Beltran, Dave Diaz,
Yes.
Susan Granzella, Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
So our next item is Agenda Item F, and it's really just an update. There's not a vote. It's an update on the steps taken to develop the proposed text on the appropriate license classifications to install energy storage systems, and it's a status update only. So, Michael, do you want to provide that status update for us, please?
Sure. So last week, we did meet with industry leaders from both the electrical contractor and solar contractor and new home building industries, just to kind of clarify the regulatory process and to state our intent to meet with a number of different agencies to assess their insight on this issue. The board motion in March was to have a committee, the legislative committee, consider battery energy storage system size, complexity, voltage, and potential risk, and draft a proposed regulatory package that would restrict or prohibit certain classifications from performing ESS. The agencies that we stated that we would meet up with include the Department of Finance. The list is on page 226. And the stakeholders did recommend that we extend those invitations to the California Energy Commission, State Fire Marshal, and a couple of other public agencies, including Planning and Research, HUD, and Building Standards Commission. So the update is we're still collecting information, and we need to obtain the perspective from these other agencies.
And just to clarify, we did discuss having another legislative committee meeting where we would roll out the proposed text.
That's right.
In a larger, if there's a lot of interest, we'd probably have it in a larger venue.
Yeah, so we don't, the update at the motion did ask staff to update the board at each meeting. So the update in June will be substantially similar to this update today, just an update as to the progress in developing the regulatory package. But because the board did assign this to the committee, there will be a substantive update with text at a later committee meeting. So not the June board meeting, but a late summer legislative committee meeting.
Through the chair?
Yes.
Are there any board members going to these meetings?
I don't think we've set the meetings yet, but that's something to consider.
Remember, of course, only if you're going to go, basically, what, two
Right,
people
I
get
didn't
to
know
go.
if there was like, if, I don't want to go to these meetings. Because I'm not an electrician. If I were a carpenter who had to deal with carpentry,
Right.
I'd be there. But
Right.
we do have someone who's an electrician on the board, and I would value that person's perspective going to these meetings.
And as that electrician, I would like to attend those meetings.
I thought that
Oh, darn.
that member had recused himself from
That
this.
would be Johnny Simpson, or not Johnny, that's Frank.
Frank.
Yeah.
Frank, right,
Frank's contractor.
yeah.
I'm an electrician.
Right, but I thought Frank had recused himself.
It actually, term-wise, it's not going to matter. Okay.
I would be very concerned as a board. I mean, I think that we've done some of these stakeholder meetings that we've purposefully excluded board members from attending, so that we didn't have any conflict. Knowing the sensitivity to this, I would urge the board consider letting staff run these meetings, handle these meetings, and report back to staff, and keep that separation there.
And if I could just mention that we've had a number of public meetings, we've received hundreds of letters, and so the purpose of reaching out to these entities is to make them aware of the study that we've done. They can look at the video of the last board meeting if they want to listen to public comment. The questions are going to be different from each one of these groups. The Department of Finance is simply take a look at what we've been researching, and do you have any concerns about proposed regulatory language that we're going to be developing? We were looking at these as being somewhat informal. Quite frankly, most of it would probably just be with a telephone call. If they want to meet in person, we'll consider that. But when we talk about the Energy Commission as an example, what are their concerns? I really don't know. It's not that we would have a scripted questions, but we would talk to them, we would document their responses, and then come back to you at a legislative committee meeting with a report on what we've learned from talking to these groups, and then provide you perhaps regulatory language for your consideration to either recommend it go to the full board or to send it back for more work. And if we can't reach some type of consensus amongst the groups, and that's one of the reasons why we met last week, was to see if there was any kind of middle ground, but it doesn't appear that may be the case. We have to be prepared when it goes to the full board to have the appropriate venue so that public can comment on what you're going to ultimately consider.
And this is an ongoing situation. I mean, the update at the June board meeting is going to be what they see in the minutes and if there's some questions that come out. And then the meetings are going to happen much later in the year. So this is an ongoing situation that people are going to have plenty of time, especially the public, especially stakeholders, to weigh in on. And I do agree with Kevin. I think since we're going to have to vote on this situation, obviously, keeping an arm's length between all the meetings and all the input that occurs, and then the board's final consideration of whatever the recommendation is probably a very good idea. So, anything further? Public comment.
Richard Markison for the Western Electrical Contractors Association. I just wanted to compliment your staff and the registrar. As Board Member Albanese pointed out, this is a very sensitive issue with very strong opinions on both sides, and I think they're doing an excellent job of representing your board in determining what's the best regulatory process and to go forward. So my compliments.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. Other public comment?
Hi, my name is Martin Hertzfeld. I'm a new contractor, licensed contractor since 2004, so it's been about 15 years. What I wanted to make aware of is that there have been continually changes as far as the intervening code cycles for the California Residential Code, California Fire Code, and the California Electrical Code for this year. And so as a result, they're addressing a lot of the concerns on the new technology, such as the threshold limits of batteries in the Fire Code, Table 605.1, and the maximum allowable capacities, Table 608.3 for 600 kilowatt hours. So anyway, what's going on is that what I'm saying quite simply is that the safety standards are catching up and were approved in 2016, 2018, and so the risks are continuing to go down and being addressed through the code, as opposed to, from the contractor standpoint of view, they have to follow the plans and specifications, for example, for 7109B, to follow those plans and specifications. So well, I guess what I'm saying is that everyone has these little marks on their appliances. These appliances for the new technology are getting simpler and safer as time goes on. So anyway, that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment on this issue? Okay. Hearing none from the committee, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
The vote?
Linda Clifford,
Aye.
Kevin Albanese,
Aye.
Augie Beltran,
Aye.
Dave Diaz,
Yes.
Susan Granzilla, Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
See you in June.
Absolutely.